Welcome to the latest edition of Too Late with Dave. I'm here at the Limelight Gallery in Frankfurt, Germany, and they've kindly let us use the gallery and their facilities and their wonderful staff, and Julian on camera and sound, last minute improvisation. And I'm here with Henry Diltz. Hello, Henry. Now, Henry has so many pictures and even more stories that it's almost impossible to start or think about a finish because it's ongoing. But we're going to talk about a few of your album covers.
All right then.
And is it right you just shot Spinal Tap? Was that for the album or for the movie?
The Spinal Tap was for the album.
Yeah.
And in the movie, Spinal Tap was just done a second documentary, second movie.
Yeah.
And they flew me to Las Vegas to take a picture of them. And they had a couch, like the CSN couch, right on the sidewalk in the city street. And they wanted me to take the CSN cover of them sitting on the couch.
How did it turn out?
And then it came out. I didn't know they were going to have an album. And that's the cover of it. And that couple of days, people kept calling me. Did you see somebody stole your picture? Somebody took... I said, no, I took that.
You stole your own picture.
Yeah.
Finally.
Right.
And what was your first album cover?
Hums of the Lemon Spoonful.
Oh. And
66.
did you know you were shooting an album cover, or were you just taking a picture?
No, because the record company art director put it together out of 4 live shots of the guys. I spent the summer of 66 traveling around the country with the Lemon Spoonful and shooting concerts, and they used 4 live concert shots and put them together and make a cover.
And just briefly, I know we're on a whistle-stop tour of Germany talking about Woodstock, where Henry was the official photographer and took thousands of pictures. But you started off as a folk musician.
Correct.
Ended up buying a camera with a buddy and photographing your friends.
Accidentally buying a camera in a secondhand store. We were leaving a town in Michigan after playing a university there. And the next morning as we left, we spotted a secondhand store up ahead. We had to pull in. You go in there to buy something you don't need, but something exciting. And my friend Cyrus was in front of me. As we walked in the door, there was a table right inside the door with little secondhand Japanese cameras, $20. And as we walked by, he didn't even stop. He just said, "Oh, a camera, I'll have one." And I was behind him. I said, "Why not?" And I'll grab one,
Fantastic.
Not thinking about it at all. And then we got back in our van, and he said, "Let's stop at the next drugstore. I'll buy film." We all bought those cameras. He handed me a box of film. And then I put the film in. I said, what are these numbers? How do you fix these numbers? He said, "Well, look on the Kodak box. It says sunlight 250 at 8. I went, "Oh, there's 250. Oh, there's 8. Okay, let's go out in the sunlight." And we spent a couple of weeks driving back to LA, taking photos of things along the way and each other. And then when I got the film developed, I was surprised to see a box of slides.
It worked.
They were little slides, many boxes of slides. I didn't know what kind of film it was. I didn't know anything about it, really. I just would look in the thing until it looked right and push the button. And luckily, most of them turned out. And it was I said, well, let's have a slideshow then. And we had a slideshow. And that's when I became a photographer, when I saw that slide glowing in the dark, It's like, wow, this is absolute magic,
And then you were friends with all the Laurel Canyon crowd, Crosby.
All the musicians who lived in Laurel Canyon, and we all knew each other.
So you're just photographing your friends.
Exactly.
And then one thing, I'm speeding through this because we have lunch waiting, and or dinner, or both.
Dinner.
But let's talk about the Doors.
Sure.
Very famous album cover.
Well, the Doors came after the Crosby, Stills, Nash.
In fact, let's talk about Crosby, Stills,
Nash
first, because
that was I mean, those guys, so I took Crosby, Stills, Nash album cover in the middle of 69. I picked up a camera at the beginning of 66. So that was 3 years into it. And I had known all those guys 3 years. I knew Stephen from 63 when I was playing folk music. And I'd met Graham and in New York with the Lovin' Spoonful when he was with the Hollies. And my second album cover was a Hollies record, For Certain Because. And I knew David from the Troubadour every night, Crosby. And so they were doing an album and they didn't have any publicity pictures. So we got in my partner Gary Burden was a graphic artist. We got in his old 50s Ford station wagon and drove around West Hollywood, jumping out here and there to take photos for publicity. And we found that old couch in front of an old house. And they jumped on the couch and, I just took the pictures. Nowadays, you see the picture immediately. Back then, you didn't, And so we took a bunch of pictures there and then we moved on. We went to a clothing store and took some more pictures and because we didn't know really what we had.
There wasn't a concept.
No. And they looked at those pictures and said, boy, this would make a great album cover.
But it hadn't been intended as an album
No.
cover.
Just publicity photos. So what happened is what always happens. I take a picture of the group right up close. I had the framed with the couch right in the frame. And then my partner, Gary Burden, would always say, back up, get the whole house. And that was great because the album cover was the whole house. It wrapped around the back.
Yeah.
And then just a couple of months after that record came out, we got a call from the Doors because they liked the feel of that album cover. Gary, my partner, the graphic artist, had been an architect before that. Architects use different materials. They like to think of new materials. So when we printed that album cover of CSN on the Couch, he went down to the printers and said, I want you to turn the paper over and print it on the back of the paper, the uncoated side. Because all album covers were glossy.
Yeah.
So they said, well, we can't do that because the ink is going to get soaked up. And he said, I don't care. I want you to do that. And it looked great. And it felt great. It had an organic feel to it. It was rough. And the Doors liked that.
But also, before we get into the Doors, was there an issue with the order of how Crosby, Stills and Nash were?
Of course, yeah. There was one problem with using the picture for the album cover, and that was they were in the wrong order. When we took the picture, they weren't called Crosby, Stills, and Nash. And then a few days later, they decided to be Crosby, Stills, Nash, but in the picture, they're Nash, Stills, and Crosby. Or Nash, Stills, and Crosby. So there was talk of turning the picture over, but then Stephen would be playing the guitar left-handed. And I said, let's just go back. It'll be simple. You jump on the couch in the right order, click, click, click. We're done. So we all got in the car and drove back, and the house was gone. No house. So they used it that way, But then the Doors, they liked that album cover. It was a fold out and had that rough texture.
Yeah, it's quite gritty.
Yeah. So we went to their office in Hollywood to meet him, Gary and I. And it was just Jim and Ray Manzarek, the keyboard player. And so we said, okay, great. Do you have a title in mind for your cover? And no, we don't have.
So no concept.
Do you have some idea of what you might want, on the cover? No, And so we're going, okay, well. And then Ray Manzarek randomly said, my wife Dorothy and I were driving through downtown LA the other day. We saw this old hotel. It's at Morrison Hotel. And immediately Gary and I both went, yeah, wow, and we went right down there and saw it. And then we came back a week later with the band to take the picture. Marched into it was a flea bag hotel. It says rooms $2.50. Winos would rent a cot and sleep it off, So we walked in the lobby, which was empty, except for a young guy at a desk. And I said, we'll just be over there. We're going to take a few shots. No, he said, no, you can't take any pictures unless you get the owner's permission. And he wasn't around. apparently he was a slumlord, and everyone was afraid of him. And so then I said, okay, guys, we got to go outside. You could stand in front of the window. They can't stop us. We're on the sidewalk. And they actually stood in front of the window. And then I looked through the window, and a big light had gone on. And I looked in. It's the elevator light. And the guy has left the desk and gone up in the elevator. And I said, quick, run in there before he comes down, And so we ran in there. We took one roll of film and got out.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So like a few minutes.
Couple of minutes, yeah.
Perfect.
Probably 5 minutes.
Yeah. And then that album cover's taken on a life of its own.
It has. And then we opened up several galleries, a string of galleries, and called them the Morrison Hotel Galleries.
And that started with just your pictures. It was your gallery with your pictures.
Yes, we started a gallery to sell my pictures, and we called it, well, we didn't call it anything, but we had a little storefront in New York City, in Soho, in New York City, and we had a big blow-up of the Doors album cover in the window, and my partner, Peter Blatchley, and I were standing across the street one day watching. In the summer, lots of people walk by, and many of them would walk by and take a glance and then walk back and look and then walk in the store. I said, look, Peter, I said, that's a magnet for people to walk in the store. But look at that beautiful lettering on that photo. It says Morrison Hotel. Now look just above it on our window, there's nothing. And he said, hey, that's a good idea. I'm going to call a sign painter tomorrow, and we'll paint Morrison Hotel on our window to match the print on the bottom. It was a big blow up,
Yeah.
And then, of course, that caught on the name. And what's odd is on the back of that album, after we shot the picture in the window, Jim said, let's go get a drink. It was like 4 o'clock. So we went to Skid Row looking for it was all bars, so you don't know which one to pick. But someone said, look at the windshield, look, the next block on the corner, it says Hard Rock Cafe. No one had ever heard of that, but that seemed like the place to go get a drink. And so we did. And Gary put a picture of the Hard Rock Cafe on the back of the Morrison Hotel. And as soon as that album came out, they got a call from London. And a voice said, would you mind if we use that name? We're starting a cafe in London. We'd like to call it the Hard Rock Cafe. And they said, sure, go ahead. So that day, we named the Morrison Hotel photo galleries and the Hard Rock Cafe international chain of restaurants.
Not bad for a couple of minutes' work.
I keep thinking I got to look up the date and see what the horoscope for that day.
We're going to jump onto the Eagles album cover. So you had them dressed up as Wild West desperados.
Well, when Gary and I did album covers, we wanted to get the band away from their managers and their girlfriends and their telephones and all that. So we'd always plan a little adventure. Go somewhere and spend the night, drive up to Big Sur.
Make it fun.
Make it fun. And be alone with the band. And then Gary would say, just shoot everything that happens. Phil's the cheapest part. Which is what I did anyway, So for the first album, we drove out to Joshua Tree in the middle of the night and spent the next day eating peyote buttons and taking pictures up on the top of a hill of a small mountain. And so for the second cover, they wrote a cowboy record, right? Desperado. And their idea was this was in 1972. If it had been 1872, they probably would have been outlaws, gunslingers, looking for girls, looking for money, looking for fun. But now, 100 years later, they channeled all that into their guitars and their music. So we got them dressed up as cowboys. We went to a movie rental house and rented cowboy gear, and we had guns with real blank ammunition.
Oh, wow.
Extra loud and extra smoke, extra fire would shoot out. And they spent the day, and then we found an old rundown movie set, it was a Western town with little wooden storefronts and a dirt road, and it was out in the Santa Monica Mountains in Agoura. and it had been used for westerns years ago, but wasn't used anymore. We went out there, and basically they played cowboys all day. They brought their friends J.D. Souther and Jackson Brown with them because those guys wrote songs together. And then there were 4 or 5 roadies and their manager and the record producer, Glyn Johns. And we all went out there. And basically they just shot the same ammunition at each other. They fought on the street. And it was so much fun. It was amazing. And at the end of the day, J.D. Souther, the songwriter, had a book of actual old Western photos from the 1800s. And it showed when a posse would shoot it out with outlaws, they would then pose with the dead bodies.
All right.
Sometimes they'd hold them up.
Like trophies.
Yeah, or lay them out in a line. And so we copied that photo and had the Eagles and J.D. Souther and Jackson Brown laying in the street like that. And the posse standing there with their rifles. And that was on the back of the album.
And you did the lettering as well.
I did the hand lettering because I did calligraphy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
That was a fun one.
And then let's talk about Jackson Brown.
Jackson Brown was, he was just going to do a record with Geffen and Roberts, who managed all the great groups. And I know there was some kind of a story about him sending a tape and it ended up in the wastebasket and one of the secretaries fished it out and played it and everyone loved it. But we got a call from David Geffen. Would you go to this young guy's house and take a picture for an album cover? That's what they said. Just take a picture for the album cover. So Gary and I went to his house. It was up by the Hollywood Bowl. And he opened the door and said, come on in here. You want a beer? You want to hear some songs? And he sat down at the piano and just played, Oh, people, look around you. And wow, it was just riveting to see him sit there and play with that voice. His songs are like anthems. And it was amazing. And then we went in the backyard and took some pictures, took a portrait. But then the story goes, Jackson was talking to Gary about the cover, because we took a bunch of portraits. And Jackson was talking, and he looked up on his wall, and there was a water bag. A water bag is a canvas bag you filled with water and put in front of your radiator on your car. In the old days, when you drive through the hot desert, so you wouldn't overheat, you'd have this water bag with cold water on the front. And Jackson was talking, he said, we could make it a water bag. Gary said, that's a great idea. And we made it look like an actual canvas water bag with his picture on it. And to make it real, Gary put what all the water bags said, saturate before using. In other words, get them wet. And J.D. said, well, you can't put that up there. They're going to think that's a title. And Guy said, no, it's big in red letters, Jackson Brown. That's the title. They're not going to think that. And then, as Jackson has said before, years later, right on the spine of the CD, it says saturate before using. That became the title,
And then we've got, I'm moving on here, James Taylor.
When you do an album cover, you haven't heard the album yet because they're in the middle of recording it, and you have to get the cover ready before anyone's heard the album. So, and I always say virtually every picture I take starts with a phone call of some kind. And this day, Peter Asher called me. I was in my kitchen up in Laurel Canyon where I had my desk. And he said, Henry, I've got this young fella over from England. We're going to do an album here, and we need some publicity pictures. Same thing as CSN.
Now, do you think record companies were asking you to shoot publicity pictures because it was cheaper than commissioning an album cover?
No. Even they pay, for the use of the album letter. Yeah. But really, I didn't work for record companies except for that first Hums of the 11 Spoonful. I worked with Gary Burton. We were a team.
Yeah.
And so we would give the record company the finished product.
Right.
And we worked for the groups or the management. So he said, could you come down to my house this afternoon and just take some publicity photos of him? And sure, went down to his house. He said, he's in the living room. I looked in the living room. The guy's sitting against the wall, sort of next to the grand piano, but sitting on the floor. And he's finger picking Oh, Susanna, an old folk song. But it sounded like a music box. It was so, I mean, once again, I couldn't believe it was so beautiful. And I took a few shots of him sitting there playing. I said, we need to go outdoors somewhere so that we can have some light, because I didn't use lights because I wasn't really a photographer. I mean, I was a photographer, but not a lighting guy, you know. I needed God's light. That's what I always said.
It's enough.
So we went out to a friend's, sort of a musical commune, and called The Farm, and took pictures by these old sheds and things. And then he leaned on a post. He's a big, tall guy. And he leaned on a post like this. And it was perfect framing, rectangular. And it looked so good in black and white, which when they asked for publicity pictures, basically, they wanted black and white because newspapers couldn't print in color. And you always needed the black and white glossy, you know. So it looked so good in black and white, I said, I wish I would have one for my slideshow on the weekend. I said, James, don't move for a second. And I got my color camera and took the same thing in color, thinking at least I could show that to my friends.
yourself,
yeah. And then somehow Peter Asher saw the color picture and decided that would be the album cover. So, and the thing that was great about it, so it was the Sweet Baby James was the name of the album and the song on the album. And I just loved that song so much and sang it to both of my little children to put them to sleep, you know. Fantastic. Good night, you moonlight ladies, rockabye, sweet baby James. Perfect lullaby, you know. Gee.
And what's it like for you seeing your pictures on album cover back then? Like for the first time seeing pictures on album
Well,
covers?
it was a big thrill to see it the first time you'd see it. Oh my God, look at that. It looks beautiful. Because, I mean, the 12-inch square was just a great art piece, you know, and they don't make them that way now. Well, people want them that way, but they got shrunk down to little ones, and then, you know.
It's not the same.
It's not the same.
And then
it was a great art form that we don't really have very much now.
Yeah, and it was a lot more relaxed. Like they send you out, just take some pictures, and it'll end up on an album cover. It's not micromanaged the way things are now.
Yeah,
where they know exactly what it's going to look like.
Exactly, and my partner Gary was great. I mean, we'd have an adventure. I'd take 500 pictures. He would look through them that night, you know, you have to have them developed first, a day later, and he would pick out the one out of all of them.
Yeah.
It was always so perfect.
Fantastic.
Oh.
And one of your favorites is America, or the back cover of America.
Yes, America.
Yeah. Another adventure.
They had just come over from England, where they'd written Horse with No Name, and they were being managed by, once again, David Geffen and Elliot Roberts. Lookout Management, it was called. And they were young kids just out of high school, American kids that had gone to, Army brat high school in London. And we just got to meet. I'm like an Army brat too. I grew up around the world with Army brats and State Department dependents. And there's something about that lifestyle. It's, you're always going or coming. You're the new guy or you're leaving. And it's some kind of a social thing. It's like a club. You know, and I hit it off with those guys right away. We became best friends, and Dewey Bunnell and Jerry Beckley are two of my really closest friends. And I think I did seven covers. But the one I liked the best was actually the back of the cover. So for this adventure, we went to an Indian reservation in Southern California and rode horseback through the desert for 2 hours till we came to a date palm oasis, palm trees and water, right in the middle of the 110-degree desert. And Gary had the idea to bring a great big mirror out there. And the idea was we would lay it on the ground, and they would stand there and peer down on it, and I would take that picture as if it were a hole in the ground.
Right.
I thought that was kind of not a great idea, you know. Nonetheless, he brought the mirror, and we had a guide, a cowboy, to show us where this place was. And he had to ride for 2 hours carrying this mirror. And when we got there, it was just the end of the day. Just the sun was about to set. And Dewey wanted to go up the side of a mountain to see the bats flying around up there. You could see them. And he said, I'm just going to go up there. And Gary said, why don't you all go up and bring that mirror with you? I thought,
He was determined to get the mirror in.
yeah. So I thought, okay, so they went up there, and that was it. We weren't taking pictures. They were just going up there. But as I looked, they were way up there. As they were walking along with that mirror, there was something bouncing in the mirror, image bouncing in the mirror, and it was the sun setting behind us. We were down in a valley, Gary and I, and there were mountains going up, and the sun was setting over there, and you couldn't see it from where we were, but from where they were, it was the sun. I said, "Wait a minute, you guys, stop for a minute." And they stood still, and I got the picture of the moon coming up. It was the moon coming up behind us. Did I say that?
Yeah, fantastic.
The moon was coming up behind us, and the sun was setting on the far side. So it was just a beautiful shot. And Jerry Beckley and I both said, "Oh, that's the cover." Gary wanted the mirror on the ground. So that became the cover. But he did an interesting thing. Once again, being an architect, he put the slit where you take the record out is on the side. He turned it so it was on the top. The slit was on the top, and then the record, the picture. So technically, you could turn it either way.
You could choose which was the front and the back.
That's right. Yeah.
So you photographed pretty much everyone, from mid-60s onwards, still doing it. But one of the bands you spent a lot of time with was the Monkees.
Yes, indeed.
Did you start on the TV show?
Yes, I got a call one day from a photo editor at Tiger Beat magazine. And he said, "Well, we'd like to hire you for the day to go down to the set where they're filming the Monkees series and just take pictures. And then we'll pay you for the day and you give us the film." So that was great. I didn't know them, although one of them, Mike Nesmith, was running the open mic nights at the Troubadour for a while, called the Hoot Nanny on Sunday night. So I'd met him, but I didn't know anything about the Monkees. But when I got down there, they were guys roughly my age. I was a couple of years older. But before that, they had old AP photographers, kind of old guys who would say, "Okay, boys, do something zany." And they just hated that, I didn't tell them to do anything because that's not my style. My style is to watch and see what's happening and photograph that. It's much more interesting than what you could make up.
And then you have the album cover of them with the rubber rings in the pool. But
that came a bit later.
Quite later, but
I did one album cover of them in the swimming pool, 3 of them at that point.
But you stuck with them for a long time. That's like one of your longest sort of associations, really.
Well, I was there for the second year of filming. Yeah. They filmed 2 years. I wasn't there the first year, but the second year. And then there was a summer tour for a couple of months that went all around. And then when they did their solo projects, Mike Nesmith did solo, and Davy Jones, they were friends of mine. They always would call me to take photos.
Great. And the same happened with Spinal Tap. You shot them much earlier.
At the beginning, Spinal Tap, right.
So you're pretty consistent with all the people you photograph. Yeah. You're still doing. Who didn't you photograph that you wished you had?
John Lennon.
What would you have done?
I have no idea. I would have watched him and waited, I'm curious about people. I want to photograph real life, what they're really like. And of course, if you're there to do a group shot, you have to get them standing together or something. But I was shooting in the dressing room or in the van or in the airport, or just see them actually, being themselves. So I did photograph Paul McCartney, Ringo Starr, and George Harrison only at Bangladesh on stage. But nonetheless, the 3 of them, but I never met John, never got a photo of him. Yeah.
But you photographed absolutely everyone else. And I know this is your day off, and I appreciate you talking to us. And thanks to Julian, who has the most extensive camera equipment available in a van somewhere else. So thanks very much for making
So we may do, right?
Thank
you, Julian. Yes. Pleasure talking to you, Dave. Pleasure talking to you.
Thank you to the Limelight Gallery for their wonderful space.
Please.
Thank you.
Here in Frankfurt, Germany. Okay.
There you go.
Good.
Thanks, Julian.